being here with us this afternoon on this incredibly exciting day to introduce a piece of legislation that I think is long overdue in American history. I just want to give a huge shout out to all of the organizers and advocates who have been doing this work in their local communities for many, many years to get us to the point as a U.S. Congress to finally do something about the teaching of history accurately in our country. As some of you know, if you don't know, I'll explain it and remind you. Prior to coming to Congress, I worked in education for 20 years. I started my career as an elementary school teacher in the South Bronx. I then spent 3 years as a high school guidance counselor and dean of students before becoming the founding principal of my own public middle school in the Northeast Bronx. And throughout my career, we were given curricula to implement and teach to our young students, mostly Black and Latino, that was often inaccurate, incoherent, and left a lot to be desired. So it's important for us as members of Congress to have a real conversation about what's happening in our public schools, in our country schools, specifically as it relates to the teaching of U.S. history. You know, for the past year, there's been a lot of disinformation and misinformation out there about the teaching of something called critical race theory. And Republicans took that conversation and ran with it and created smear and fear and panic campaigns across this country because obviously the issue of race is something that is a high voltage issue that many have stayed away from for far too long. But in order for us to be a healthy, thriving democracy, multiracial democracy, where every child understands their worth and value in our schools and in our country, we have to teach history comprehensively, but accurately as well. So today, my office is introducing the African American History Act, which will work with the National African American Museum of History to invest $10 million to create curriculum that can be used within our K-12 schools across this country, so that we have accurate, comprehensive resources that will be made available free of charge to schools that want to implement an African American history curriculum. This will be a game changer for school districts across the country and is a direct pushback to the misinformation and the nonsense that's out there about the teaching of race in schools. Just 1 or 2 points on that. Number one, K-12 public schools are not teaching critical race theory, number one. Number two, what schools are doing is pushing back against a curriculum that continues to be implemented along the lines of European settler colonialism and white supremacy. We're moving towards a curriculum that ensures all children in this country, not just Black or brown, but all children are empowered with the accurate teaching of history, of the history of this country, because only then can we move forward as a multiracial democracy. Only through a quality, accurate, comprehensive education will we stop the move towards fascism that is happening in our country. Will we be able to stop issues of anti-Muslim hate, anti-Asian hate, Islamophobia, sexism, and all of the things that continue to plague our country. But we are beginning today with the African American History Act because it's the historic, accurate, comprehensive teaching of African American history that will help us honestly deal with our history, look ourselves in the mirror, and begin to right the wrongs that contribute to systemic racism that we continue to see, not just in our education system, our healthcare system, our criminal justice system, but also right here in the halls of Congress. Unfortunately, institutional racism continues to persist. So I am proud to be joined by advocates from throughout the country today, and of course New York City and the Bronx is represented. So it is my honor to introduce, to give remarks today, Ms. Tanisha Grant from Parents Supporting Parents in New York City. Thank you, Ms. Grant, for being here.
Hello, thank you, Congressman Bowman, for having us. Parents Supporting Parents New York is a grass-led nonprofit organization that is based in Manhattan, New York City, in Harlem to be particular. Right now, our main focus is the digital divide. So we have given almost 500 children HP touchscreen laptops because we believe in education. We also believe in Congressman Bowman, and we fully support. I am one of the parents that started the culturally responsive education and curriculum work in New York City with Coalition of Educational Justice. We fully support the truth of this country and this country's origins being told to our children. We fully support the descendants of chattel slavery, knowing the history of this country, and also knowing people like Ida B. Wells, Pauli Murray, James Baldwin, Octavia Butler, Toni Morrison, people's names that I did not know until I was a full-grown woman in my 30s. All I ever got from school, and all they are trying to give all children that go to school in this country, is a narrative that white people did everything and the rest of us are along for the ride. That is a lie. And if you are educated, you understand that they were enslaved people. And there's a difference. And this is the things that we need to teach our children. So once again, we are here with our team. We came up from New York City today to be here with Jamaal because we believe in him, we believe in this, and this is only the beginning. Thank you, Congressman Bowman, for doing this. We appreciate it.
Woo! Thank you.
We are now joined by at least one of my congressional colleagues. Don't be hiding in the back. I would like to call up the most recently elected member of Congress, Representative Shontel Brown, representing the great state of Ohio.
Thank you.
Woo!
Greetings. Thank you, Congressman Bowman, for inviting me to speak today. For more than 400 years, African Americans have been integral to the founding, growth, and advancement of America. From the survival and the arrival of the first enslaved Africans to the shores of the New World to the present day, from the abolitionist movement to civil rights movement, from scientific advancements to cultural contributions, African Americans have been and always will be an inseparable part of American history. And in a generation after generation, African Americans have been on the front lines, calling for America to live up to its founding creed, that all people, I can't overstate that all people are created equal, doing so even when their own rights were denied. We have made so much progress toward that goal, yet the injustices and inequalities that continue to plague our nation make it plain that much work remains to build a fairer and more just America. We know where we are and we know where we have been to ensure that we do not repeat the mistakes of the past. Let me repeat that. We must know where we are and we must know where we have been to ensure that we do not repeat the mistakes of the past. Knowledge and education help to combat prejudice and hate, and instead tolerance, and justice. That is why I am proud to be an original co-sponsor of the African American History Act. This bill would support and expand existing programs at the National Museum of African American History and Culture that are voluntarily available for students, parents, and educators. Expanding access to truth ensures our nation's young people better understand Americans' history through the lens of the African American history and culture. Why is this important, Chantel? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because Black history is American history. And because understanding Black history is critical to addressing the racial injustices and inequities that still exist today, from police brutality to the pandemic's disproportionate toll on Black Americans, we must heal. In order to heal, we must begin to understand the complexity of our history. To build a future in which there is justice and equity for all, we must tell the truth about our past. And to bring about reconciliation, we must reckon with the injustices past and present. For as Dr. Martin Luther King said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And I love you for showing up today in support of this legislation. Thank you, my brother, Congressman Bowman, for allowing me to partake in this presentation. Thank you all. Let's get this going and move it forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Representative Brown. It is my privilege and pleasure to introduce Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, representing Michigan. Which district? The 13th District Strong of Michigan. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Representative Tlaib, for being here.
Thank you so much to my good colleague, Congressman Jamaal Bowman. We're here to tell the truth, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love speaking truth. I think that's what's sometimes missing in spaces like this. So I can't thank you enough for your leadership, Congressman Bowman, for making sure that my children and so many others understand the critical importance of African American history in our country. I want to get personal for a moment. I grew up in the most beautiful, blackest city in the country, the city of Detroit. And I really, truly would not be here. If not for my Detroit public school teachers, many of my Black mothers, who taught me about African American history and enabled me to connect it so much to the struggle of my Palestinian family that right now lives under oppression and occupation. And my heritage to all of that, and again, the connectivity of so many of my Black neighbors continue to struggle. That connectivity has been so powerful to bring here to the halls of Congress. History is not just about what's written in textbook. We all know that. We've lived it. It is about really moving forward and navigating forward and speaking our lived experiences here in our country and telling the truth about racism and white supremacy in our country, in the United States, enables every person across our nation to identify the bigotry that has happened before and that oppression that continues today. And it gives us a roadmap, Congressman Jamaal Bowman, the roadmap to create better tomorrow for marginalized communities and generations to come. During a time where the right wing wants to wash away our country's painful history of racism and white supremacy, during a time where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s words are used to push back on truth-telling, unbelievable. We must say enough. And today, with the African American History Act, we are saying enough is enough. We are also saying that the truth is so critically important as we move forward here in our country. We are equipping our students, our teachers, our parents with the resources to share that truth. And we are not allowing white supremacy and racism to wash away our real history. I'm proud to here today to stand with Congressman Jamaal Bowman and so many of my colleagues in doing that. And Jamaal, if you didn't notice, even when my voice shakes on the floor, I speak that truth. And it is those black mothers that continue to do that. Thank you so much. Thank you again for doing this, and it's the right moment. Thank you.
It's great to work here with people like Rashida and Chantel and so many members of Congress who don't just speak truth to power, but live truth to power. And unfortunately, America's been telling its citizens half-truths and lies for far too long. And it's time to turn the corner and live as our full selves and to live fully in truth. It is my honor to call up my brother, Ms. Boulder Project, for some remarks.
Good afternoon. I'm Mundell Robinson, and I wanted to come today. I wanted to speak today because I wanted to be a voice of reason for anyone who may plan on standing in opposition of the African American History Act, this important piece of legislation. Because how can you be so strong and lovers of America's military, but reject the black history that will tell you who and what Crispin Attucks' contribution was? How are you a lover of America's ingenuity, but afraid of a black history that will tell you who Alexander Miles is? How are you proud of America and its history when you only know a portion of it, and you only acknowledge a portion of it? If America's story was the Bible, it seems that some of you are only interested in the New Testament. When in actuality, America's greatness, its Old Testament, so to say, is the story of black struggle, contribution, and sacrifice. To be a proud American is to be proud of all America's black citizens and our unyielding commitment to the stars and stripes that sometimes leave us bloody, seeing stars in unjust prison stripes. I think if you get giddy on the inside when you hear, "Give me liberty or give me death," then you should be happy and your soul should rise when you hear tales of Sojourner Truth screaming, "Ain't I a woman?" Black people are the politicians, the first responders, the sailors and the Marines, the soldiers and the airmen of past and present. So we are obligated to stand here in support of Congressman Bowman and the other co-sponsors to ensure that the African American History Act passed with no problems. That's all I want to say today. Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother Robinson. It is my honor now to call up Brother Tyleek M. Mcmillan from the National Action Network to provide some remarks.
It's hard to come after that. Thank you, Congressman Bowman, for your leadership. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tyleek Mcmillan. I serve as the National Director of Youth and College for the National Action Network. And I bring you greetings from our founder and president, and the one who thought in that robbery to take chances with me, Reverend Al Sharpton, and our senior vice president, Ebony Riley, in their absence. I heard an elder say to me once, some of us have been in the house so long that we forgot what the storm feels like we feel that we have arrived somewhere. And I know many are comfortable in their own complacency to feel there's no need to address racism, white supremacy, and how it still impacts our lives today. But we must recognize that policies attempting to suffocate this much-needed national conversation are an obstacle to the pursuit of an equitable democracy and society for us all. Systemic racism is not simply a thing of the past, but is deeply embedded in the fabrics of this nation today. And after the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent global Black Lives Matter protests, we've seen a fresh demand for curriculums to be decolonized, targeting the whitewashing that is prevalent in all levels of academia. And we continue to put pressure to teach and to study the work of Black authors, inventors, philosophers, to educate our children on Black culture, and most importantly, teach the full scope in the pain, resilience, and beauty of Black history. Because there are numerous reasons why this is not only crucial, but also beneficial. I believe racism is learned and taught, not inherited. And so let us educate our children, parents, and teachers on our full, undeniable history so we can step in the right direction to build a more perfect union. Again, thank you, Congressman Bowman, for your leadership, and the National Action Network stands in full support of this act.
So in closing, I just want to identify where we are. I was sworn into Congress January 3rd, and on January 6th, we had the first attack on the U.S. Capitol since the War of 1812. An attack where the flames were fanned by former President Donald Trump and was instigated by white nationalists. And now in legislatures across the country, we see Republicans trying to suppress the vote and gerrymander districts around the country so that they can take back power next year in pursuit of taking back power in 2024 to continue what started as a big lie after Donald Trump lost the election. So considering all of that, and considering how some of my colleagues continue to fan the flames of racism, sexism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, and discrimination, this is the perfect moment to introduce the African American History Act, and a perfect moment for Congress to push not just our schools, but everyone in this country to tell the truth and live the truth. Are there members here that I missed? Who's here? Brett Bush? Okay.
And Yvette Clark is coming as well.
So thankfully I have two more members, at least two more, who will be showing up, Representative Cori Bush and Representative Yvette Clark. Okay, welcome. I'm about to say that. We'll be here in a moment. Thank you so much. And then we'll take questions after those two.
Look at her suit. Yeah, it's cute.
It is my honor to introduce Representative Cori Bush, representing St. Louis to the fullest.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for coming out today in support of this critical piece of legislation that I'm proud to join Representative Bowman in introducing, the African American History Act, a bill in support of Black history and in support of an American education that prioritizes truth. Black people built America. But many of us were taught in classrooms where that history, if it was even acknowledged at all, was hidden, whitewashed, or marginalized. I want every Black child growing up in our country to know that when we talk about American history, we are talking about a history filled with pain and hardship, but also with a tremendous amount of joy and creativity, Black excellence, Black solidarity, and Black power. I want every child to read books by Black authors. And I'll say that again, I want every child, we want every child to read books by Black authors featuring Black lead characters that open everyone's eyes to diverse cultural experiences. Because Black history is the history of our country. Black history is American history. Black history is U.S. history. By investing in our history, in our museums and programming and social media, we can change the narrative that the next generation of Black children absorb at their desks. The National Museum of African American History and Culture is not only a place to view photos of Black heroes, but to revive and uplift their timeless ideas of justice, equity, and inclusivity. We have an obligation to ourselves and to our children to remember Fannie Lou Hamer, remember Paul Robeson, remember W.E.B. Du Bois, to remember Fred Hampton, and millions of others. millions of other black people who've changed our world for the better. The African American History Act is a shining example of how we can use our positions in Congress to create the change we want to see in our communities. If we are serious about building an America rooted in love, rooted in humanity, and tearing down the structures of white supremacy and institutional racism, then that process must start with education. Thank you, Representative Bowman, for your visionary leadership. I'm proud to be joining you in this African American History Act. We must make this bill law for the sake of our country's history and for the sake of our country's future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The others are not here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a few questions. If anyone has some questions, we'll take a few. If another member shows up after questions, then we will allow them to say a few words. Any questions? I think we're good. So we were crystal clear. We explained perfectly exactly what we're trying to do here. So I'll just make some final remarks and just reiterate what I said before. If we truly care about the health and well-being of our nation, if we truly care about all citizens, we need to teach our history accurately and comprehensively. And to my sister Corey Bush's point, this is not just about providing an excellent quality education to African American children, it's about providing accurate, comprehensive education to all of America's children. And that's how we evolve into the multiracial democracy that we are trying to be. And that's how we grow and maintain the health and well-being of our democracy through an exemplary education. And it begins with the implementation and the adoption of the African American History Act. Thank you all so much. Wait, whoa, we got one more? Hello, sir. We have one more speaker. Thank you so much. AFT, the American Federation of Teachers is in the house, and I thank you so much for being an original endorser of this act.
Yes.
Please come up.
Thank you. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It is with great pleasure that I come before you representing the American Federation of Teachers, 1.7 million educators from across this nation to support this act. Tell the truth. Tell the truth about American history. You can't talk about American history without talking about African American history, without talking about a persevering people, without talking about the ups and the downs, without talking about the ins and the outs, the one step forward and the one step back. This is who we are as Americans. African Americans deserve the right not only to be at the table, but to be a part of the fiber of America. And we want this truth to be told all throughout America, throughout our classrooms, throughout our public school classrooms, here in Washington, D.C., at our African American Museum. We stand proud with Congressman Bowman and others to ensure that quality education is by, for, and about African American history and everybody's history, because it is incumbent upon all of us to understand who we are, where we came from, and it allows us to know where we are going. So again, I want to thank you and say to Congressman Bowman and others that we stand in full support. Randy Weingarten, our president, could not be here today, but I'm Frederick Ingram, Secretary-Treasurer of the American Federation of Teachers, and we work hand in glove to ensure that the voice of our educators, the voice of our communities and students is big and bold throughout this country and is going to be prominent in our classrooms all across the United States of America. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all so much for being here. Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you. Thank y'all. Corey, thank you.